Right, now we're going to try improving the impedance response of what would be a power supply. We want to try and maximize the bandwidth over which the impedance is less than 50 milliohms. Let's start off with our 22 microfarad Samsung ceramic capacitor. We're going from 1 kilohertz up to 65 megahertz with 6 volts peak to peak input and a 0.75 ohm reference resistor. We're measuring impedance. Right, looking for the 50 milliohm point, it's about here. That'll do. I'll make a marker there, and at the opposite side, the 50 milliohms about here. So we've got a frequency range of around 187 kHz up to 5.7 megahertz. Now we will try improving this by putting in parallel a Wurth 330 microfarad polymer electrolytic capacitor. Before we make the next capture, let's record the current impedance and Resr. We'll do this using the references. So we are add ref for channel A and add ref for channel B. Now I fixed a 330 microfarad Wurth polymer electrolytic capacitor to the board, and we'll start the sweep. Now we can see immediately that the impedance of the board at low frequencies is now quite a lot lower. It's around 348 milliohms, whereas it was about 6 ohms before. We can also see that we've got a composite impedance plot with the superposition of both of the responses of those capacitors. The ESR is now also much lower, starting at around 25 milliohms at 1 kilohertz and much flatter. So you can see it here. And so in terms of our 50 milliohm thresholds, beforehand we were at 187 kilohertz, but now we are at 50 milliohms there, 11 kilohertz. Put a marker there, and it's improved slightly up at higher frequency because we've got parallel capacitors. Looking at 50 milliohms, which is about there. We now go to 9.6 megahertz. So we've widened the range over which the impedance is less than 50 milliohms by quite a lot. Note the anti-resonant peak at 500 kilohertz. The impedance is still pretty low, less than 20 milliohms, so below our 50 milliohm limit, but it can become quite high. Avoid these anti-resonances by making sure your capacitors are quite different in value. Anyway, we've increased the bandwidth over which the impedance is low by quite a bit, at least a decade. So this has been a useful exercise, and I commend you to using the tool to figuring out how well your power supplies are doing. Thanks for watching.